So this past week, of course, Nintendo had their quarterly financial report for quarter two of 2022, and there was a lot of stuff in there, things like hardware sales, software sales. I used to talk about them a lot, but I don't know, as time has gone on, it's like, how many times can you act surprised that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold another 3 million copies? I mean, it's a game that won't die, much like a cockroach or something like that. But of course, when you have a quarterly report, you also have the investors with the Q&A section. And we talked a bit about some of the Q&A stuff earlier this week, but as time has gone on, we've gotten the official English translations of this Q&A section. And one of the topics that was brought up was a next generation Nintendo Switch console. Now, obviously, a lot of people have been talking about this and everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I think some people might have been kind of missing the mark about what Nintendo was actually trying to say and maybe not expressing enough concern about some of the things that they did say pretty much verbatim in this. So what did Nintendo actually and really say about the next generation of the Nintendo Switch or Nintendo hardware in general? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. First thing that was brought up, sort of talking about the next generation of the Nintendo platform, whatever it may be, we all assume it's a Nintendo Switch, but maybe it's not or something like that, was of course the fact of backwards compatibility. Now, backwards compatibility is something that's been kind of hit or miss with Nintendo. Obviously, it didn't have backwards compatibility with the Wii U because of a different physical media format. I mean, you know, one's a disc and one's a cartridge. You can't really put a disc into the Nintendo Switch system. But this question was more primarily focused on the back catalog of stuff as far as the retro games are concerned. Of course, you can't transfer over those Wii and Wii U eShop titles that you bought on the Virtual Console onto your Switch because they went in a completely different direction. And I guess this question was more focused on if Nintendo was going to do something like that in the future, where they sort of change how everything works, or were they going to keep the Nintendo account system? So the person asking the question said, I think there are both advantages and disadvantages to having newly launched hardware maintain backward compatibility with previous hardware. But what kind of internal discussions have you had on the subject? And then Shigeru Miyamoto answered the question saying, in the past, we built a service called Virtual Console as a way for players to enjoy classic games on modern hardware. In terms of compatibility, visual content has an advantage because it can be enjoyed continuously as long as you have a playback environment. However, legal rights for visual content can become quite complicated, so I have mentioned before that Nintendo is proceeding with visual content with a firm grip on the rights. Previously, software development for dedicated video game systems was conducted in development environments dedicated to each hardware platform, of course talking about how they used to have a handheld division and a separate console division. That meant that those environments could not be brought forward when the hardware changed, and it would become impossible to play software for previously released hardware without making changes. However, the software development environments have been gradually integrated, so generally speaking, it has become easier to implement an environment when software released for past hardware can be played on new hardware. Having said so, Nintendo's strength is in our creation of new entertainment, so when we release new hardware going forward, we plan to continue to offer new and unique gameplay that cannot be realized on existing hardware. Now, it's kind of a twofold thing. Of course, we talked about earlier this week, Shigeru essentially saying that, you know, it's easier to have backwards compatibility on consoles now because of the general environments that, you know, these companies have. We've seen it time and time again with companies like Xbox and PlayStation now being able to realize, you know, some of their back catalog of games and back catalog of systems. But I think my main takeaway from this whole thing is two things. One thing is, like, if it's easier than ever, why aren't you doing more with it? You know, why isn't there Game Boy stuff available on the Nintendo Switch? Like, at the very least, like some Game Boy games, some Game Boy Advance games. Like, I don't understand why Nintendo is so stingy with their, you know, their online offerings for this, especially when you look at previous consoles that had things like Nintendo DS games on there. And I just find it strange. I find it very strange how they're essentially saying, you know, it's easier than ever to do this, but we're not really doing it. Like, when was the last time you had an NES or Super NES update for the Nintendo Switch Online service? You got to remember, not everyone has that expansion pack program. There are people with just the base online service, and have they really been getting their value? There's really been no extra incentive as far as exclusive stuff like a Pac-Man 99, or even, you know, the classic games on there that were offered at that tier before the expansion pack came along. So I find it to be an interesting answer, because yes, if it is easier, like, why not just go forward and, you know, focus on that and make more content for the millions, you know, the over 100 million Nintendo Switch owners that you already have. Keep them happy. I mean, worst case, okay, they might not play the games, but you might get a new audience in with these retro systems. Of course, the second thing I'm taking away from this is that final thing, which is kind of the other point of this video as far as the next generation is concerned, because of what Shigeru Miyamoto said. Having said so, Nintendo's strength is in our creation of new entertainment, so when we release new hardware going forward, we plan to continue to offer new and unique gameplay that cannot be realized on existing hardware. Now, that honestly kind of worries me a bit, because that just screams to me that it's not just going to be a Nintendo Switch that's beefed up. You know, if you're offering experiences that can't be offered, I guess you could look at it one of two ways. You could look at it from a graphical standpoint, like, okay, these games aren't able to run on older hardware because we have new technology, and this new technology allows for higher frame rates and, you know, higher resolution. But when you look at how Nintendo operates, that's usually not one of the primary focuses. It's usually kind of focused on sort of a gimmick sort of thing. And that actually parlays into the next question that was asked about sort of the future of the system. The proximity between consumers and Nintendo is now closer through Nintendo Account and Nintendo Switch Online. And I think that it has become easier than before to see things like user activity in games. Do you think this kind of information will be developed? The proximity between consumers and Nintendo is now closer through Nintendo Account and Nintendo Switch Online. And I think that it has become easier than before to see things like user activity in games. Do you think this kind of information will affect the development of software and the next generation platform? To which Takahashi and Shioda basically fielded it together and said the following: tools like social media provide us with more opportunities for feedback for consumers, and we receive a variety of information. Although we cannot adopt all the input as they are, we need to always pay attention to how people respond to our games and then think about how we can entertain them as we proceed with development. We want to develop products that are fun for consumers while also enjoying the development process, exploring what kinds of interesting things are possible, including new initiatives for Nintendo Switch Online. Then Shioda says, in the Nintendo Switch generation, it feels like we've gotten closer to our consumers via Nintendo Account. I think that an integrated hardware software business that captures the spirit of Nintendo will continue to be central to many of the activities that spring from the strategy described in today's briefing. The most important thing with our video game platform is to deliver a unique gaming experience. In our development of both hardware and software going forward, we must consider ways to more easily connect our core video game business with the consumer experiences outside of our dedicated video platform through Nintendo Account. We are not at the stage where we can talk about the next generation platform, but we think it is important to create unique integrated hardware and software products. The activities we leverage through Nintendo Account should be well connected to these products. So basically, they're saying a lot of nothing, unless you kind of read between the lines here. Obviously, some of the things they're trying to leverage with this are things like the amusement park that they have going on. Obviously, Mario films, the whole Nintendo film sort of thing is starting to gain a little bit of ground and stuff here. But the thing I find puzzling is we're not at a stage where we can talk about the next generation platform. Like, why? Why are we not at that stage? We're starting to see in many different regions that the Switch is starting to lose its sizzle. We talked about how in Japan, the PlayStation 5 outsold it. Then yes, the Nintendo Switch came back and outsold the PlayStation 5. That's cool. I'm not saying it's doom and gloom. When you look at the European market, the PlayStation 5 for the first time ever just outsold the Nintendo Switch. And when you look at the NPD market, it's been 2 months since Nintendo Switch has been the top selling system. I'm not saying it's doom and gloom or anything like that for the system, but the system is starting to show its age. We're coming up on the 6th year of this system with, you know, it releasing in 2017. It obviously wasn't a technologically advanced system, and as time has gone on, you know, what worked doesn't necessarily work in the current age. You know, being able to play games, console quality games in the palm of your hand was a different sort of experience. There weren't any other companies doing that, but with the thing of rise, like, you know, the rise of cloud gaming and being able to play your Xbox games wherever, remote play with PlayStation and the Steam Deck, like companies are starting to adapt to this whole sort of thing. There's more and more companies that are trying to emulate and take a piece of the Nintendo Switch's pie, which makes perfect sense. But why do you need to reinvent the wheel with your hardware? Like, that's the one thing I keep taking away from this. You want to have a new hardware experience. Like, why? I don't get why they seem to feel like they need a gimmick or they need something different to stand out. You could do the gimmicks with the software. And let's be real, Nintendo has a lot of gimmicky software. Some of it hits very well, and some of it not so much. But that's what makes Nintendo an interesting company. When you start to see a diminishing of sales, and it's not the end of the world, people. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. I'm just saying in certain regions, there are starting to be diminishing of sales when you start to have actual performance issues with first and major third-party games on the system. Then are you extending to the limits of what the current system can do? And if so, why would you not want to move on to the next generation? I don't care if the next thing that comes out is a revision or if it's a brand new system from Nintendo. I just want a more powerful Switch. Like, it works great. I love the ergonomics of the system. I love the idea of this system, and I love the capabilities of the system. But the capabilities of the system as we have it right now are starting to reach, you know, ahead. Like, it's starting to reach it's pushing it beyond its limits, this, that, and the other. There's no reason that any game running on the Nintendo Switch should run at sub HD levels in handheld mode. Like, that's obviously something that's just down to the hardware. It's a 720p screen, and yes, 720p is the absolute bare minimum of HD that many people don't even consider that. But when we're talking about 300 and 400p with these images, like, those are sub non-HD images. Like, it's just weird to me. Like, I get it. The Switch is sold very well. It's still selling very well. It'll continue to sell well. Yes, it'll have dips in other regions, but at the end of the day, what do you and I care about the success of the system? What do we care about the sales of the system? You know, we should care about the experiences. We should care about the quality of the games. I'm not a graphics whore. Like, I'm definitely not. Out of everyone that I sort of associate with, I'm probably the most lenient when it comes to things like graphics. I can still enjoy a 720p 30 frame per game second. But there are bare minimums that you need to consider. There are bare minimums of games that need to be taken into account. Like, when first party games are struggling and having massive amounts of pop-up and slowdown, like, maybe it is time to start talking about the next generation. But maybe Nintendo doesn't quite know what they want to do with the next generation. Could this be a Wii to Wii U situation where they're not quite sure about what that next move is? Because let's be real, the Switch was probably supposed to be the Wii U, but because of circumstances and the sharp decline of the Wii, they had to put something out there. I don't know. There's obviously a lot of things you could speculate from this. I think from my perspective, this is what I think is happening. This is what I think that they're talking a game, and that we need to start seeing the game. You know, 2023, maybe a system doesn't come out, but you sure as hell need to talk about something. You sure as hell need to talk about something new. And I don't care if it's a revision. I don't care if it's a brand new console that replaces the Switch. Don't rock the boat, man. At the end of the day, your consumers, they love this idea. They love the functionality. Just keep it and make it better. You don't have to go crazy. But maybe people want them to go crazy. Let me know what you think of this in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Hit that bell notification as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. And remember, I'm not a Nintendo YouTuber. Later.